Overview of how the shutdown could mute the Epstein files fallout. That is important. Let me explain to you what's going on here, because there is the shutdown on one end, and then you've got the Epstein file on the other end. What's going on? Why is this important? Well, I'm going to provide you with an overview of the current situation in Washington regarding the pending release of U.S. government documents. Yes, there is an effort underway right now in Washington to release everything, literally, related to Jeffrey Epstein. And we're talking documents, but we're talking most importantly about financial information. Financial information that is held. Where did the money go? Who got it? What went on? So we're going to explore there's an intersection between the political strategy, the legislative procedure, the public communication, analyzing the how timing and institutional control can influence the impact of sensitive disclosures. Because, yes, I know you've heard the fact that there is there's a shutdown. So at the end of the day, so what? What does it have to do with the Epstein files? Well, you have to understand that this shutdown is holding up a huge amount of files to be released. And the way they're going to be released is because they need one vote. And I will explain. And that vote will allow will force a vote in Congress to allow for more release of information. Now, are they going to want to release it? Are they not going to want to release it? Who's going to say no? That's going to be the question. So the U.S. government right now holds a wide range of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, collected across years of investigation by the Department of Justice, the FBI, and related agencies. Now, as you know, what you've heard mostly is the fact that Epstein, was guilty, and then he died. And then we had Ghislaine Maxwell that got 20 years. And then she came out, she said a few things, she was brought out, and basically said that I didn't do anything, and no one did anything. It was kind of an incredible situation where basically she's saying nothing happened. It was a big misunderstanding. Okay, fine. But that's not the point. These materials include court filings, financial ledgers. Which banks allow this to happen? JP Morgan paid a lot of money already, and they're going to be paying more. I'm going to make a point to you that there is a link, or at least it's extremely coincidental that somehow the delay in the release of that information is being impeded within the shutdown. You'll see. These materials include court filings, financial ledgers, seized hard drives, flight logs, interview transcripts. Now, none of this has been released yet. Well, yeah, I know. We have 30,000 pages have been released to congressional committees, as per the request by the Republicans and Democrats. And but some of it may remain sealed, redacted, or classified under privacy and national security exemptions. So, what are these documents that are still withheld and that we are waiting for the release? So, it's called the discharge petition, led by Representatives Thomas Massie, not a great Republican friend of the president, and Ro Khanna, a Democrat, seeks to compel full public release of these records. The unreleased materials include grand jury transcripts and exhibits, seized hard drives and digital media, financial and offshore transaction records, complete flight logs and travel manifests. Who went to the island? Victim and witness interviews, unredacted, jail surveillance and death investigation files, internal DOJ and FBI logs related to past investigators. So once you have all that, then you have a clearer picture. Now, you have to understand that right now, these files, even though they have not been released, are impacted everyone. There's a book out, probably heard about that book, and already because of the book being released, we are asking, and I did a live on that, we're basically asking, well, not us, but they are asking, and they did get it, Prince Andrew lost almost all of his titles. In fact, they're going now after the monarchy to basically said, maybe he should lose even more of his title. Maybe he shouldn't even live in this wonderful place that he's living in right now near the castle. Maybe he should be out, completely out. And frankly, we should review the procedure. And frankly, we might even want to ask the king himself, what did you know and when did you know it? This is how far this thing is. It's just on a book. We haven't even released those documents. Once those documents get released, that is when you're going to see lots of interesting discussions. Okay, so the discharge petition, right, will basically release everything. Now, for you to be able to view and release that information, you're going to need 218 votes and procedural roadblocks, right? The House discharge petition requires 218 signatures to force a floor vote. It currently stands at 217, pending the swearing in of, as I said before, Representative Adelita Guevara. Once that threshold is met, the rules mandate a 7 legislative day waiting period before a motion can proceed. However, during a government shutdown or recess, legislative days are frozen, allowing leadership to delay, and that's what's happening, the petition certification strategically. Now, of course, the Speaker of the House says, no, I'm not delaying anything. I'll be more than happy to do it. Of course, everything, this shutdown is literally being held by the White House, right? In the sense that the Republicans' stand is basically to say that no, there is nothing going on here. We're not gonna negotiate with the guns to our heads, and the Democrats are basically saying, no, we love healthcare, and therefore you should listen to us, and it's a back and forth. They need the White House to get involved to break it down. Okay. Now, of course, there's pressure building up on the Speaker. He's being sued. Why are you holding off that vote? Why are you holding off that vote? That vote needs to be released. That vote needs to go, and you need to do it. And for the time being, that is not happening, unfortunately. That is not happening because they do not wish to proceed with it. Okay, so what's going to happen next? Right? Well, once the White House gets involved, then it would work out. Now, what are the mechanisms that could diminish the impact of the release? Well, this is where it becomes interesting. Several mechanisms can reduce the public and political impact of the Epstein files released. 1, heavy reductions on the privacy and national security grounds. 2, timing the release during a noisy news cycle, such as government reopening. We're going to reopen the government, we're going to release information, everybody's going to be out, but that's going to be a bit of a non-meter because everybody's going to wonder, what's really going on, right? Do we have that information? Do we know what is going on? And that's a problem. The problem is that you need a preemptive framing of the files as nothing new. Legal containment, many cases are closed and beyond statute limits. They're going to say, we can't release that information, and everybody's busy coming out of the shutdown, right? Public desensitization after years of speculation and leaks. These factors basically ensure that even if disclosure occurs, the event may register as a minor footnote rather than a major reckoning. They thought that they were going to release everything and everybody had just nothing else to think about but that. But because of the shutdown, and this is interesting timing, right? There was a strategic use of the shutdown to delay and diffuse. I mean, we have many people suggest that the ongoing shutdown provides political cover to delay the Epstein files vote. In fact, he's being sued for not releasing it. Speaker of the House, by keeping the House out of session, leadership can postpone the procedural clock, divert media coverage, and prepare narrative framing that minimizes fallout once the release occurs. The sequence suggests a deliberate alignment: delay the vote, reopen the government with fanfare, then quietly release the files amid competing headlines. You won't even notice it. Plus, whatever you notice is going to be heavy redacted. Who cares? It's too long. But don't forget, 2 banks are being sued right now. If the discharge petition crosses 218 and the House resumes session, the Epstein documents could be released within 10 days. However, the scope and the depth of the release depend on leadership procedural choice and the DOJ redaction authority. It remains possible that the release will occur quietly with limited new revelations. So everybody's going to be happy. See, we'll release it again. Can we move on? So the intersection between the government shutdown and the pending Epstein files release highlights how institutional timing can shape public accountability. And that's the issue, folks. There is accountability on that matter. I explain. So, now, can we make the case that they're looking to bury the impact of the release after the shutdown? Yes, that's a very reasonable inference based on the political and procedural dynamics right now. You could make a case, evidence-based case, that delaying the discharge petition and aligning the Epstein file release with or after the shutdown serves to bury or soften the impact. It's going to come out. It has to come out. So they need to soften the impact. So let's think about it. The timing advantage, right? So what do we have? Well, during or immediately after a government shutdown, the media and public attentions are overwhelmingly focused on fiscal deadlines, federal paychecks, and political blame, right? That's what you've heard. Any unrelated release, even something as dramatic as the Epstein documents, will be drowned, by the shutdown, reopening coverage, and inflation numbers and budget politics. Politically, this timing dilutes the outrage. So they're going to do it, and that's why I believe, because they can't wait any longer. So trust me, this shutdown is going to end very soon now, because they can't hold it any longer. Public attention gets divided, memory fades, and the story dies faster. That's what they want. They're pushing it. They're holding it until there's enough pressure building because of the shutdown. And then they say, okay, no more shutdown. Release the files. It's going to be part of a big brouhaha, and no one is going to remember or pay too much attention. So it's a procedural shield, it's called. It's a leadership controls the calendar. As long as the House is in its shutdown mode recess, the discharge petition clock isn't ticking since legislative days are paused. Right? You have 10 days by the time. Basically what they do, they're going to force it on the floor. You got to vote for it. And who's going to say no? You got to vote for releasing anything. And then after that, 10 days. This gives Speaker Johnson or leadership the power to delay certification, letting them synchronize the petition's activation with the post-shutdown news cycle. By reopening the government first, they regain procedural control over when the vote and thus the document release occurs. Now, of course, you're going to say this is purely coincidental. Well, it's certainly a lot of coincidences. So they can choose a politically convenient moment for release, not one dictated by the media. So once the government is reopened, the leadership and executive branch can present the files within a tightly managed narrative. Now that we've stabilized the government, we're ensuring transparency. Right? We're going to pre-release. No bomb shells. They already reviewed materials. Journalists are already covering economic recovery. They won't have time for it. So the political calculus is a leadership and agency know the content of what's being held back. Obviously, they've been there. They know. If it's potentially embarrassing but not criminally explosive, time is their best ally. No one is going to go to jail for this, right? although people have lost their jobs, people have lost their crown, right? Think of Prince Andrews. Think about the ambassador to England, lost his job recently because of that. So delaying release only after a major legislative event gives institutions time to prepare responses. The public outrage curve shortens dramatically. So yes, I think the logic holds. Government shutdown and its prolongation function not only as a fiscal stand-up but also as a political buffer, delaying and dulling the eventual impact of the Epstein files release by pushing it into a period of low public focus. And you have to wonder, how can that be? What needs to happen is you're going to find out very soon that the information that's going to be released is going to be pretty interesting. I mean, don't forget, we have had a lot of people involved in a lot of financial transactions. I think that the angle is going to be with the financial part of things. The amount of money that went back and forth. In fact, like I said before, two banks are being sued right now because they said that you allow this to go on by banking this man. You have allowed all this to go on by ignoring him even after he was found guilty. You need to pay attention. And they actually want some of those bankers to come to Congress and actually talk about it. They want them to come and talk about what they knew and what they did not know. That's going to be a lot of damage. That's going to be difficult for them because there's no way you could say that nothing has happened. There's no way you could say that, you know what, I didn't know what was going on. No way. So at the end of the day, what we're saying is there's more to come to this story. There's a lot more. But because of what the Congress holds, it's going to be difficult. Now, what are those? Keep in mind, we're talking discharge petition. That is the key. The discharge petition aims to mandate that Congress hold a floor vote. So they're going to force a vote, even if the Speaker of the House says, we release enough information, no more. He says, no, this is going to force a floor vote of a bill that would compel full release of the government records related to Epstein. From public statements and the petition framing, the following are the type of materials that we're going to release. So let me tell you what it is that they want. And this is a picture, by the way, of that 218th vote. She is the one that's going to release, that's going to allow the release of all that information. So they want all records held by the DOJ and FBI related to Epstein investigations, including the case of Ghislaine Maxwell, search warrants, seizure inventories, interview transcripts, motion papers. 2, unredacted documents, version of those records. Large portion remain redacted under existing release. You can't even see what it is because it's completely covered. 3, records that might shed light on any larger network of individuals or entities that Epstein worked with. Let's see the more names. Let them come out and say, I didn't have anything to do with it. Well, you were there. He sent you money. You give it back to him. The petition supporters say the public deserves transparency about who else might have been involved. It doesn't mean you were guilty, but you were involved. Materials number 5, materials regarding Epstein's death, the circumstances surrounding it, and what investigations or reviews were done by the government. Number 6, documentation about how Epstein's cases was handled historically to show whether there was institutional failure or complicity. And then, of course, the flight logs. Now, of course, these are very contentious matters. Why are they contentious? Well, there's victim privacy, legal constraint, right? Just because you're listed doesn't mean you're guilty. Sealed grand jury and indictment documents cannot be released. National security and intelligence issues. Whoa, we can't talk about these things. In fact, there were cases that they said that even Epstein might have been a spy or working for the CIA. Political pressure and optics, the timing, volume, and nature of what gets released affects credibility of institutions and elected officials. Administrative burden and redaction of cost and time. Even when documents are turned over to the committee, they still must be undergo a heavy redaction. That's going to be a lot of damage. That's going to take a long time. And that's what they're all concerned about. How much more of this can we take? How much waiting is going to be needed? And this is what you're going to see. This is what we're going to see. Let's see how quickly, I will tell you, within the next week, this government opens up because they cannot wait any